Surf at the Circo Perotti in Spain. I recorded it analog with my friend Jorge Explosion of the Doctor Explosion, and he's all into vintage kind of music, vintage sounding. And he told me something that I actually tend to agree with. When you dance, the bass, you move with the sound of the bass, and the drums gives you the tempo. In the early 60s, the bass was missing. The Bel Airs didn't have any bass. Why? Because they were not amplifiers that can hold the sound of the bass. So amplifiers like these were covering lower frequencies. The guitars were sounding bigger. You needed 15-inch speakers. Before the blackface revolution in '64, bringing up the treble, then you got the bass, all these frequencies got covered. So a good way to make people dancing is the four on the floor. You need the four on the floor. That's the base of surf drumming. The surf drum, the traditional stuff, is four on the floor because this is disco music. So this makes you dance. And I think this is the reason why the original surf drumming has the four on the floor. One other thing that was missing, and this is part probably of the creation of the surf instrumental movement, is because everybody likes to sing, but not all clubs have big PA where you can be heard well. So surely the young guys couldn't afford a PA. So rather they put the vocals into the amplifiers, but you can imagine, you cannot really hear that much. So the instrumental wave came out strong, and people like Leo Fender made the guitar cheap. And even these kind of drums, historical brands like Ludwig were pretty cheap at the time, like the Superphonic snare or Super Classic snare, so stuff that Buddy Rich were using were like $65 price in the catalog. So everybody in the early 60s would start could buy the instrument cheap. So basically, you got the instruments, you're missing the vocals. So instrumental came out strong, and the kids could play everywhere, turn up the volume loud. So going back to the surf beat, we have this thing going on. Then we have this cymbal, inherited from jazz music. Because in jazz music, you don't do this. You do this. You keep the tempo on the right. You have crashes, of course, but you don't do this. So the ride, also because is a cymbal that has a lot of sustain, a lot of bell, depending on what you have, it keeps the tempo and it gives you the sustain. It fills up the frequencies that are missing. The sound, like for the reverb on the guitar, stays longer. And you can use it in many ways, depending on how big is your cymbal, how good it is, how thick is the metal. You can pick out 100 sounds out of this thing. So this is basically surf music, in my opinion, together with the bass drum. This comes later, because in the beginning, nobody was doing this. I think one of the first person doing this kind of things was Ringo of the Beatles. Definitely Ringo did another thing. One of the very first person who did this. Before Ringo, he used a traditional grip. But the traditional grip makes it very hard to get the ring shot. You have to tilt the snare, and it's not something very cool. This thing, everybody can do it. Especially young kids with their first guitar, their first amplifier, and their first drum kit make this thing very easy. This was not taboo anymore. But when you do this, you discover the rim shot. And when you don't have amplification, these things, raising up the volumes from the amplifiers, help a lot. So putting all these things together, with the double beat going on the snare, comes out something like this. So this is basically the surf beat. This is what made it all. Technically, when you play, you tend to play the first beat a bit lower. practice a bit to try to get a more balanced sound, but this is part of the practicing. But this is something that everybody could do and keep the tempo very well. Now I think that is in the traditional surf drumming, you don't have to do many things. Nobody in the traditional surf music was doing strange things on drums like we do today. We need to keep the tempo, to keep the feel going, to keep the disco beat going. So you need to be steady, precise, and let the rhythm guitar do the job. The rhythm guitar, these kind of things, together with a properly amplified, loud, and drippy rhythm guitar, makes the real surf sound. This is what I like to do. Now, this is basically used in most surf music. If you replace the ride with the hi-hat, it comes even more natural, in my opinion, to go 4/4 with this one, because it helps you keeping it. So this kind of aptitude using the hi-hat, it became a bit more progressive. It has been developed much more, and I would say that many drummers today like more to use the hi-hat, because it's something that you see from any kind of drummer from any genre, and of course give you a more powerful, energetic thing. It doesn't have the long sustain, especially if you're a band that don't use tons of reverb. You know, if you do very much energetic. Now, the person who's following me are gonna tell you more about these and the rolls and all the rest. Now, one guy that, if you listen to the strange stuff done in the early 60s, there are not many rolls on the toms. I think even this thing inherited much from jazz music, where you use the tom for particular things. You use the snare for everything. One of the fastest drummers in the 60s was Ron Wilson of the Surfaris. Probably, someone say, I read somewhere that he was the fastest. There are some songs like the Surfaris Stomp, where it never did anything particular, even if you use the tom, like in Wipeout, there's all something that stays there. Dusty will tell you more about this, but in Surfaris Stomp, he was doing something like, all about the speed, but having a clear sound on the snare, metal snare probably, getting the rim shot. This helped a lot in the creation of certain. I told you about already the traditional grip. This I think was abandoned fast in surf music, because I like to play with this, but some traditional stuff, but of course doesn't give you much power. So if you play, you know, like this, it gives you much more power. Also, one thing that you tend to do when you use the match grip on the left hand is that you leave the stick on the skin much more often, which in jazz music is wrong. This is wrong. You have to go off the drums, but you have to gain a lot of control. It's not easy to do it. With traditional grip is easier, but you don't get much power. So I think this is all part of the music revolution of the early 60s. The last thing that I want to tell you is another tempo that is not a surf beat, but, well, it's not a traditional surf beat, but it's a tempo that I love. And there is only one band doing this beat. And he's doing this beat for most of the songs that they play. And this is probably, strangely, my favorite surf band ever. I'm talking about the Astronauts from Colorado. The Astronauts were not a surf band, were just good musicians. Like Dick Dale at the Rendezvous, they were doing their weekly show in a place called Tulagi. And they were lucky that one day, one guy from RCA was seeing them and say, you guys are good, you come to do a record in LA. And, you know, like Rich Fifield, the lead guitar player, said, you know, when the biggest label in the world asks you to do a record, you say yes. Whatever you want us to play, we play that. They went to LA and literally they were told, this is a Showman amplifier, this is a Jaguar Jazz Master, this is a reverb tank, now play surf music, because everybody wants to listen to surf music. Fortunately, RCA had composer like Lee Hazelwood working for them, people that compose things like Bach, but Going back to the beat, to do a sort of a tempo that, this is a discussion going on Surf Guitar 101 a lot, because people say, oh, we cannot get the astronaut's beat. This is not true. The beat is pretty simple. It keeps the 4 on the floor, same pattern on the hi-hat, but it goes like this. Without this thing, you cannot play Surf Party properly. You cannot play Hot Dog End. You cannot play anything. And he was using traditional grip, never getting the rim shot. Very, very. He was playing like this with a very small cymbal. So going. This is the astronaut tempo. I consider this a surf beat because this gives the typical sound of that band. Because if you do this thing with an extremely dripping double guitar, because there were 2 guitars doing this thing, one doing the chorus and the second one doing G, 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 G. This gives you the astronauts. And they were the only ones, I think, doing this kind of beat. So this is what I wanted to cover. I told you about the surf beat. I told you about the bit of changes from jazz music and how it comes. Now I'd like to call on stage the friend Tim Stevenson from the Pyronauts, who's gonna take it from here, starting from the basic surf beat, and tell you how this thing evolved in traditional surf music. You know, he's a very good drummer. One of the most amazing version of Wipeout that this guy played, and they're fantastic. So Tim, come here.